Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Thank you.
Hi, Guru. Welcome, everybody. We are today starting chapter number 4 at our podcast, The Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line. And we're starting with the first section of chapter 4. Chapter 4 is very interesting. We had in our last chapter, we were showing Yogananda meeting a saint. At this time, it's a bit different. In this chapter, we have Yogananda. He's going to be running away to the Himalayas with some friends, and we'll see how that goes. And today with me, as always, it is Lauren, Priyank, and Chris. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Good, thanks. I had a good, something interesting happened to me on my way into work this morning.
Oh, really?
Can I share? Is there
Yes.
time? So I was on the bus and I thought it's been a while since I shared the autobiography of a yogi. So I've got a few new ones. And so I took it, and I've got at my local station, there's a public bookshare library. So I thought I'd just leave it in there. So then I was on the bus to the station, and I took the book out. I sat down, took the book out, and started writing a little note on it. In the note, I was going to write, "Dear reader, this is no ordinary book," and then just leave it at that. And then there's a elderly lady next to me. As soon as I took the book out, she started doing this and looking at the title. And after, I was like, my pen wasn't working very well, so I was like fidgeting, and she's like, "Oh, I know about Patanjali. I've read Patanjali." And I was like, "Oh, have you?" I was like, "That's interesting." And then she started talking about her yoga teacher and how she does meditation in the morning. And then I said, "Oh, you'll really like this book. Why don't you take this book?" She's like, "Oh, can I? You wouldn't mind?" I was like, "No, of course you can take it." So she was delighted to take it, and so I didn't even have to give it or offer it to anyone. She literally took it. And so the funny thing was, I took it out of my bag for less than 2 minutes, and then it was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually have a story from yesterday. It's not as good as this one, but it is a story nonetheless. At my work, you don't often have conversations about yoga too often, but a lady yesterday said in a meeting where we were talking about motivations and motivational work, what keeps you motivated, and part of it was talking about what you do at home and breaking up your day because we all work from home. And she mentioned her goals involved in self-realization, and immediately my ears perked up, and I messaged her. We work closely together, so I pinged her after and said, that caught my attention. What are you doing in regards to self-realization? Now, alas, it turned out not to be self-realization fellowship, but we did talk about yoga and talked about Paramahansa Yogananda, and she knew, oh yeah, this is the book that Steve Jobs mentioned. So it's just nice to have these little conversations, and I think she might go and read the book herself now just from that little conversation. But you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. I'm hoping I'll see this lady on the London Centre one day, because she was like, she was saying, "Oh, so what do you teach yoga? Like, what do you do?" And I was like, where do I say? So I talk about my podcast. I say that we do meditations at the centre that I sometimes lead. And I was like, I paused, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to ask you such a deep question." I was like, no, it's not a deep question. Anyway, carry on, Mike. Sorry for the
I love that story. I think it's great that those kind of chance encounters happen. Public transport, like when you live in LA, this never happens. Everyone goes to exactly the place he wants to go by himself or with the group he chose to. It's much more. It's not so many chance encounters the way things are structured here. Anyways, let's continue. Let's talk about chapter 4 a bit in general. It's a bit of we're in the young years of Mukunda, and the tone is mostly jovial, I find, in those first chapters. And you have a bit of a, this chapter is a bit more of an, the last chapter was a very it was like a miracle that happened, and it was you had a lot of things that felt very saintly, holy. There was a lot of those things coming out. This one is a bit different. This one is more like he's going on an adventure. He's going out there, and he is actually trying to sneak out of his home, out of his school. He's organizing. He's planning ahead very well. So he's exactly knows the train schedule. He knows I want to first meet up with this person and then go here, and every little thing he feels under pressure. We'll talk about this a bit later, because his brother might have an idea that this might happen. So so you have this kind of definitely the way the chapter concludes is a bit comedic. There's also miracles happening later in the chapter, and the readers are also being introduced to a whole lot of geography in India that he goes to, because he wants to go to the Himalayas. So he stops here and he stops there. And Priyank mentioned Rishikesh is one of the places that are quite saintly, and I think they're also known very well in the spiritual circles, I guess. Yeah, and we will go on with like we said, there's like a miracle happening later on with the police, and then it kind of concludes with Yogananda getting a saintly teacher who will then help him, who is supposed to teach him Sanskrit, but doesn't actually do that, and is more like a spiritual teacher. Yeah, Chris?
It's a really nice chapter, isn't it? And it's a little bit longer, I think, than the previous chapter, so it might take us a few more episodes to break down the sections of this chapter. But it's quite interesting, isn't it, that Yogananda is really driven to the point of needing to escape to the Himalayas again, over and over again. And this is one attempt that's, as you mentioned, like really well thought through and planned, and quite a little bit more strategic than before, a little bit more professional, as it were, of an escape from the previous attempts. And it's all driven by his need to try to find his guru, who's, we're going to talk about, he's seeing in the visions, and it's such a powerful draw, like a magnetic draw. But it does take him maybe away from where his guru actually is. So it's quite interesting that he's still driven to do this. And for me, this chapter really talks about his strong devotion, but really the lessons that he learns, we're learning through him on that journey, at the same time that he's trying to find his master. So it's really nice, kind of young, through his young eyes, like a naive take on his pursuit of finding his guru. But yeah, really nice chapter.
Yeah, it's funny as well, isn't it? Lots of comedic, childlike comedic elements. And there's also, we talked about, Mike said this, he meets some saints, real saints, later on. And he talks about, he mentions fake meeting fake pundits as well, people that are trying to trick him. So there's a bit of that. And then there's also a big chunk of it, because Shastri Mahashai, who we talk about later in the chapter, is Lahiri Mahashai's disciple again. And then there's a whole bit on Lahiri Mahashai. So 4 chapters in, and 4 Lahiri Mahashai chapters, really.
Yeah, it's almost like Yogananda can't get away from Lahiri Mahashaya. He's surrounded by his devotees, of course, his parents being devotees of him as well. Yeah, so this like Chris said, this story is a bit longer, but it's also exciting and comedic, like Priyank said, and it's really the tone, it gets a bit faster, but it's also it's for the reader, you're in for a ride, and it's fun. It concludes on a funny note, I would say. So it starts out with him. I would say this is a weekday. He would go to school usually on a day like today, and so he and his friend Amar Mitter, who is a colleague at school, they have like so Guruji reads out instructions that he gave to him, which says to me, I don't know how old he is at this point, maybe like a young teenager, I would say. And he's like a very strategic thinker, and he writes everything down, and he wants to make sure that no mistakes happen. So it's very, I'm not sure if when I was his age, if I would have been as organized when I would have planned to run away from home. We have mentioned that when I think Chris mentioned the story once when he went out, but he was much younger, so that's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, I'm not going to compare myself to Yogananda. Mine was probably more in anger, as we're about to delve into, than it was for love for the Himalayas. So a little bit different.
Mine, me and my friends used to do something similar to this. Three of us, we used to we had a group called carjacking. So we'd take our parents' cars and go ride in the middle of the night, and elaborate plans to like and Lauren.
So naughty, Priyank. I'm so shocked.
Lauren is in full teacher parent mode, mouth aghast, fully open. No, but it was childhood.
Did you succeed?
Oh yeah, but the trick that you have to be very quiet and strategic about the timings, and
And
so sneaky.
Where'd you take the car, Priyank? Did you guys go to the McDrive, or what you
took it to a very quiet location, and you can put your foot down.
I
do not children. I do not recommend
Flabbergasted.
I'm
absolutely flabbergasted.
I do not recommend this course of action, because you'll leave people like Lauren's mouth gaping open, disbelieving. But I'm sure listeners know my mischievous side and would not be surprised, and even you, Lauren.
No, I am shocked.
No,
you're so virtuous.
The virtues came later, Lauren.
Yes, indeed.
I'm still waiting for those to come.
I think car is a good segue, because he tells Amr to take a hackney carriage, and so I'm a really bad English person. Like, I lived in London for 8 years, and I heard hackney carriage. I had no idea what it was. So
you went to Hackney though, didn't you?
I went to Hackney.
That's probably made the Hackney carriages there.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured, but I had no idea what they looked like.
No.
I think I went to Hackney even with you, Priyank. We went to find a vegan joint there somewhere.
Box Park.
I don't remember. Yeah, I think it was called the Temple of Satan or something, right? Satan, which is not what it sounds like. It is.
Lauren's mouth is gaping again. What kind of temple?
It's a vegan fried chicken shop.
What podcast am
I on? Yeah. So let's continue with more virtues and less bad stories.
Yes.
So then I went online. I've tried to find out what a hackney carriage was, and then it said hackney carriage is actually another word for a London cab. And then I was even more confused. But then, luckily, Lauren put some pictures down for what a hackney carriage would look like, and it's more like a small horse carriage with, like, I think, one row, and it's open on all sides, but it has a roof. And yeah, I would think that you have like the driver in front, and then you would have like the three kids on the bench next to each other. That's how I imagine them going on to their adventure. I'm guessing they took it to the train station. And yeah, there's a website that I want to recommend to people. It's called forgarpar.com. We'll put the link in the description, and it's a website that's dedicated to Guruji's home, 4 Garpar Road in Calcutta. And they have a really nice picture there of a 4-Garpa road with a hackney carriage in front of it. So please have a look. Going to mention they actually have quite a few good pictures there for that story. So I recommend it.
So he lived this Calcutta. He says that would move to Calcutta. So then presumably you're saying that this would have been his home, the 4-Garpa road.
That's right.
That
yeah.
is mentioned here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think his dad worked for the railway company, as we heard, and they moved around quite a lot. And then I think Calcutta was like the final destination for them. That's where they moved and then stayed for a long time, and that's where a lot of his growing up happened. Guruji's. Yeah, and then there is one little paragraph. It's actually just 2 sentences where Guruji gives a reason why he so badly wants to leave his home and why he so badly wants to go to the Himalayas. And I'm just going to read it out. It says, "The amulet, like a spiritual yeast, was silently at work within me. I hoped to find amid the Himalayan snows the master whose face often appeared to me in visions." It's very beautiful, and I feel like there's like two things in there. Like we said before, that Guruji is when he talks, he paints pictures that are really good, that you can imagine really well. And I think the spiritual yeast is one of those. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I think this whole chapter actually is such a well-written chapter that immediately it's full of action, isn't it? You know, leave your classroom on some trifling pretext, and you immediately get transported there, and you're there alongside Yogananda going on this adventure. It's just so artistically done. But this amulet that we're going back to, we covered it in a lot of detail before on the previous chapters. So do you think that this amulet was part responsible for the visions that he was having? Somehow that this transfer of energy or whatever the amulet was doing was prompting Yogananda, like, you know, showing him some images of Sri Yukteswarji. What do you think? Do you think it has anything to do with it? Because it's so closely linked and mentioned there in those sentences.
It's an interesting thought. Certainly is plausible, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think so. I think the amulet is kind of one of the things that gave him more, the amulet plus the story, how it was given to him, right? Is kind of, it kind of makes the whole thing more real, his search for guru, and it awakens this kind of yearning. Yeah, it must do. We can mention the kind of the word he said, spiritual yeast, because when I think of this, I'm not sure if you guys like to bake or make pizza or something like this, but one of the things, you know, when you take the yeast and you put it in warm water, and I always wait then a few minutes to see if the yeast is still alive, right? To see if it starts blooming, and this is so beautiful. And then then you make the dough, and you put the dough in a bowl and put a wet cloth on top, and then you come back an hour later and it's twice the size. So it makes it puff up and increase in size. Yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, that would make you a very good baker, whatever you call them, those people.
Bakesman is good. I like that.
I really love the spiritual yeast paradigm or concept, because yeast is, as you described it, as the process. I think it bubbles. If it's alive, it bubbles when you put it in water. But my experiments with yeast and making sourdough have epically failed. So regularly yeast and me are not friends.
I think sourdough is more difficult, right? Because the theory is that there's yeast bacteria in the air all the time, right? So you just make a little bit of wet dough and put it in a mason jar and cover it with some holes and wait for the bacteria to come in, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
You're asking the wrong guy because I've failed.
I've never
obviously.
done it, and it sounds like it takes a lot of patience, and then you can get the wrong kind of bacteria in, and then you have to start over, and sounds like too much work for myself. But I heard during the pandemic, a lot of people started starter dose. So yeah, Chris.
I did have a go at this in Italy when I was there making pizzas, with the yeast and everything, but it was heavily supervised, so it worked out okay. But I can't take any credit for it, unfortunately. It's a nice parallel, isn't it? The idea of the consciousness, as Yogananda talks about it, like a bubble almost expanding, and he's talked about that before. And the yeast, Priyank, you just said that you put yeast in water and it sort of bubbles. So maybe that was what the amulet had a part in doing, adding that fervor and expanding that bubble of consciousness for Yogananda. And he was suddenly, maybe having these more visions about his Guruji or something like that. Yeah, it's nice use of words by Yogananda.
I love it too. It's such a wonderful description in just 2 words, isn't it? Spiritual yeast. It just came to me though, as you were talking about bread. I was thinking, that's the lesson coming back around again about talking about, how it's 25% our effort and the rest is God and Guru, because you can't make bread without all the ingredients, right? So you need the spiritual yeast, but it's useless if you're not receptive and don't have the right ingredients. So there you go. He's given us all the lessons in tiny miraculous ways. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And the sentence, it goes on where he says, amid the Himalayan snows, the master whose face often appeared to me in visions. And of course we know who that is, right? He's on the SRF altar. He's Swami Yukteswar, who will be his guru. And I think one of the things that Sri Yukteswar was really known for was the kind of training that he gave to Yogananda. But first, Priyank.
Yeah, just quickly. I just remembered a word that then Sri Yukteswar used very well. And that was when he was talking about the causal world. And he said, causal bodied beings feast only on the ambrosia of eternally new knowledge. So equally beautifully put, using food food metaphors in there.
Yeah, the ambrosia. I like it. Yeah, and Sri Yukteswar had interesting, let's say it like that, interesting ways of teaching Yogananda, and Yogananda loved it, of course, and he always said how much he enjoyed his training. And Chris found a section that talked about it, and we're going to read this out. Lauren, would you be able to start the first one? Thank you.
He says, my master, Sri Yukteswar's training in this was wonderful. No matter what happened, he accepted no excuse for my becoming mentally ruffled. I used to go to the ashram and sit at his feet to meditate and listen to his wisdom. When the time drew near for me to go to catch my train, he would be aware of my mental restlessness and would just smile at me and say nothing that gave me leave to depart. At first, I thought he was very unreasonable. But after a somewhat strained period of this discipline, he explained, I am not grudging your preparing timely to go to the train, but I say there is no need for you to be restless. Why allow nervous excitement to ruffle the mind? You should be naturally calm when you are with me, and when the train time comes, calmly get ready to go. He made me miss several trains until I learned how to be calmly active as well as actively calm.
Wow.
This you must learn. Likewise, instead of hurrying in a state of emotional excitement to get some place, and then not enjoying it once you arrive because you are restless, try to be more calm. There is no excuse for being restless within. If you are always calm, you will also be more efficient. And if you want to wake up from this cosmic dream world, you must practice calmness, no matter what happens. As soon as your mind becomes restless, give it a whack with your will and order it to be calm. Don't make a fuss about anything. Whenever you worry, remember you are deepening the cosmic delusion within you.
Amazing. This was the kind of training that Guruji was longing for a long time, and that's why he went out on this whole trip to the Himalayas to find a guru who would teach him in this kind of way. I wonder if that would have helped him doing the escape more successfully if he had this counsel from Sri Yukteswar before as a kid already, to always be completely calm, because we know later that some of the stories that Guruji tells while they're on the train that kind of upsets one of his friends, and that kind of sabotages the plan a little bit. So possibly.
We never really know why things happen, right? And why we do things, and the actions that we take have consequences, and those consequences are immeasurable. So just like we're about to talk about, the friend that's involved that doesn't, wants to go and doesn't really go, doesn't commit. Maybe that has a real significance for that individual, and that has some great part to play in that individual's life. And for Yogananda, it seems maybe less consequential ultimately, even though he gets, he does have some nice experiences through it. But yeah, it's all part of the play, all part of Maya, isn't it? That he doesn't ultimately achieve his objective to, go to the Himalayas, and maybe that would have led his, life down a whole different path. Thankfully, he came back and came to us instead. So I'm kind of thankful for what he did plan, as we're about to discover.
Mm-hmm. And Guruji, he keeps setting the scene. So he said already, he gave instructions to his friend from school to meet him outside. And then he mentions here now that him and his father, they actually, or him and his family, they actually moved to Kolkata, and they live in this house there now. And not only is that the case, but also his brother Ananta got married, and his wife now lives with them. And that I assume he mentions this here to kind of explain kind of the dynamic a little bit in the house. Priyank, what do you think about that?
Yeah, correct. This is obviously still a custom, the patriarchal Indian custom of the girl moving in with the boy's family, and then she doesn't just serve the husband, she would serve the whole family. And so in that way, they're kind of, the family is integrated, but not just one generation, to potentially 3 generations as well. Probably similar to Lauren and Chris, the way it was back in the day in UK, I imagine. But this concept of the girl having to leave her home through this custom, there's a famous poet, Kabir. Before I look at that, Chris, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think in the UK, that's, as far as I'm aware, the story of how it came to be that women would take the man's surname, because it used to be, John from Hughestown. My name's Houston, and that traditionally came from Hughestown. So back in the day, there's not that many people, so you'd be known as Chris from Hughestown. The town was called Hughestown, and that kind of evolved. So the woman would go to live with, Chris in Hughestown, and she would assume that surname as well, because she went with him. It's a little bit different, I suppose. Now I went with Barbara, my wife, to Brazil, and I've switched the position. I think many people are doing that these days. Most of my male friends have actually moved, whether it be to Leeds, to London, to San Francisco. I've got very, very close male friends that have all went and done the opposite these days. So it's very much different.
You and all of those other male friends would get mocked for that choice in India. It's a banter thing that everyone has. If when the boy goes and lives with the girl's family, there's a name for it. It's called Ghar Jamai, which is house husband. So basically, the husband is like trapped in the snare of the lady's family. But no, that's obviously just banter amongst families. But this concept of the lady having to make this sacrifice of, leaving her home and going to a new home, a new world, is played upon by Kabir. Kabir is that famous poet in India, a mystic, Sufi mystic, that he's mentioned a few times by Yogananda as a self-realized master. He wrote a very nice poem about this and related it to the spiritual path. And the first line, and it's been sung, and I'll put a link to it in the description so you can have a read about it. But the first line is Nahi harva humko na bhave, which means the person doesn't like to think of his old home anymore, or he feels guilty that he's like settled, or she in this case is settled in her new home, and when her family calls her, she's like, no, this is my home now. So this person's always torn between new home and old home. And Kabir in this poem describes the relationship between the aspiring devotee, that being the same, like when he's embarked upon this spiritual journey, he's still got this other life, and then he's torn between which way to go. And this new life, he's settled in this, he's being more and more joy and happiness in this new life, but the other life is still there, sometimes pulling him back.
It's kind of stark contrast to how Yogananda wants to live his life, isn't it? That we actually look at that later in this chapter, that take the path of the worldly life of sorts and everything that brings, and the complications and the commitments, versus the renouncance life that he took. And this chapter is a little bit about that, isn't it? That Yogananda is still pushing and striving for that life, and the world's trying to pull him back in, and he's trying to fight it. So it is quite a stark contrast. And the thought came to me there that I'm assuming that Yogananda's mother would have very much loved this setup. She was looking forward to the wedding, and looking forward to having the first son married off, and that pushing forward there. So it is maybe a little sad in that sense, but something that I think is good for everybody there, having a close family unit.
I was wondering, so Mukunda is the second oldest son, right? What if he had gotten married? Would he then also have stayed in the same home and also brought his wife?
Generally, yes.
Oh, wow. That's okay. Yeah, good.
And then it becomes very big and unmanageable, and then hence usually then just the eldest. If it is a massive family, then it's usually like the eldest son that stays with the parents, and then the other ones have to make a new home for themselves somewhere.
Right. Also, the eldest son got dibs on the house, kind of. Okay.
Dibs on the house, the responsibility for the whole family, pretty much. Hence, Ananta is playing this role of trying to shepherd young Mukunda into the family opinions.
Nice. And like I mentioned before already, the house that they're moving in to is in Kolkata. The address is 4 Garpar Road, and it is actually not very far. Like if you are at the Yukteswar ashram, which is near Kolkata, you can make a trip there, depending on traffic and stuff. I think it took us like an hour and a half to get there. And it's the family that lives there, I'm not actually sure if they are directly related, but they take care of the house and they welcome devotees of Yogananda. So you can come in and they tell you the story. They're very loving people. And one of the things that Yogananda mentions is he does his daily meditations in a little attic room. But first, Priyank.
Yeah, that picture, there's that very famous picture of there's a little shrine for a meditating half-naked young Mukunda, or young Yogananda, and there's a picture of him, and above him there's some pictures of the Guru lineage and Yogananda's parents as well. And that picture is really famous amongst the followers of Yogananda. Whenever we post that on our social media, it always does supremely well compared to other posts.
Yeah, I think especially in the YSS community, I imagine a lot of people will have visited that place and will have gone there. And it's a very small room. Like, you come in, I think there's an area on the right where you can sit on a like a elevated kind of area, and then there's a little rug in front of that shrine where you can bow and say your prayers, and it's very nice. And I guess when you imagine it in those days, you would have had Guruji, maybe he would have not had his own room in that house. He would have had to share his room with some of his siblings, right? That's how I imagined it. And then when he wanted to do his daily meditations, he needed a space that was empty and that was quiet, or relatively quiet. Or I think he was looking for a place where he can be by himself mostly. And so that was that attic room, and he must have spent hours and hours, days, and so hence this vibration in this room is very powerful. Priyank?
I love that he's mentioned this again, made it very explicit. I had a small attic room where I engaged in daily meditations and prepared my mind for the divine search. And Guruji in lessons and in the teachings always emphasizes the need for us to make meditation like a regular or routine part of our life, and making it into a habit. And to enforce that, you have to dedicate a small portion of a room, or if you can, a room, make it your meditation room, and get used to that. And I love that he's just written in it here, and this is made explicitly, just planting seeds for all of us every now and then in the book to make this part of our lives.
Yes, and there's no excuses. Like, he was like a young teenager, and he did that by himself, right, in his family's house.
I remember Mike, we were discussing this a few years back when where did you live? It was in London, wasn't it? I think. And I said, oh, why don't you make a room? And you're like, I don't have a room. I don't have a spare room. And then you made a small corner of your room, and you made that your meditation area with your meditation cushion. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I still do that now. I live in a 1-bedroom, but now my bedroom is actually pretty big, so my corner has become bigger as well, which is just nice.
Didn't you also put, was it you or someone says they also put screens, those folding screens, so then it becomes like this kind of like a enclosed space?
I had a screen for a while, but it didn't make it. When I moved to the US, my screen didn't make it. I sold most of my things when I moved out of my London apartment. Yeah, but those are all good ideas. I have a devotee friend who recently moved into a new apartment, and he has the same setup with like a meditation shrine in the corner with a screen, and it's really cool. Yeah, Lauren?
Wow. I'm just wondering how the rest of you do your setups. Like, do you have a room, or do you have a corner of a room, or what do you do?
I after a few years of debating, because we used to have a lot of visitors, and the box room is actually heavily used. And in my old house, Mike, I think you came there when Young Girls meeting we had, and we converted the small room into a meditation room, or not a meditation room, it was a temple room. So we had a temple, a small shrine, as per the Indian customs, with a few deities, and that my mum used to worship. So we had it just in some part of the house, but then we converted it and made it into that room. But then I remember her debating with my mum and my wife, saying, you know, we're going to need to do this, and then no bed can be in there. And they're like, why can't a bed be in there? Like, no, it has to be just this. And I remember having this debate, but after we did it, we never looked back. It was such a good decision. And even now, where we live now, we've still got that same setup with a small room, fortunately.
That's so beautiful. Wow. Chris, what about you?
I have a very makeshift setup at the moment, but I have high aspirations to actually build a meditation like hut of sorts in the middle of the woods here. So it'll have Guruji and all the SRF gurus up there. It'll be a proper shrine. So one day it's going to be great. But at the moment, I'm dedicated to a part of the living room essentially, and then I have a corner and I have my you know, the picture set up there, and an area for me to go to regularly. So it's known as my part of the room, and that's just where I go morning and night.
Chris is so advanced. He's like taking the teachings further and further. Meditation room is not enough. Meditation hut in the middle of the forest where seclusion
You know,
can reign.
I would love to have, you know, the Eco Village here as part of a yoga retreat for the local SRF group. So that's ultimately where I'm going with it, but not for me, for other people as well. But yeah, one day.
Selfless as well, full of virtues, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yogananda did say solitude is necessary to become established in the self. So you are going to be a long way there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm living in like a little mud hut essentially at the minute, like this. Yeah,
You do look quite muddy, actually. Come to think of
I'm
it.
dirty from, you know, the bottom down. But yeah, the little bricks are actually made of you know, just earth. You know, they're sustainable bricks and everything, so it's kind of already there. So it kind of helps. You know, Yogananda, I think SRF, they talk about the ideal living conditions, and they said, you know, under a tree or in the open, but next to that, it's like, you know, in some kind of earth built environment. So I'm doing my meditations in there, and I think it actually does help a little bit. But
Nice.
What will you learn?
So I used to meditate actually in this room. I had a little
I can see
well, used to be. I had a little like a short table with the altar underneath the fireplace, and I'd sit in the middle, and that would be my spot. But I got this feeling that wasn't quite right anymore, because it's in the space where a lot of movement happens as well. So I now meditate in the tiniest corner in my bedroom, because that's all I have in this house. So it's at the foot of the bed, the little alcovey bit, and it's just under the window where there's this big tree. So it's actually a very ideal spot. You can just about cross your legs and sit down. So it's ideal. And I've got my altar on the wall. So it's makeshift, but it does what it needs to do.
Very nice.
Very nice. Sometimes I hesitate a bit with I would say creating a permanent room. I mean, if I had one, I would definitely do it. But I mean, I sometimes hesitate with putting too much into this, because I meditate in my meditation spot maybe half of the times, and the other half of the times I meditate on the bed, on the sofa, on I don't know, one of my kitchen chairs. Like sometimes I just sit somewhere and I feel like, you know, what would be good right now? Meditation. And then I just stay in that spot and do it there. And yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that a lot of people do, but I'm a bit like that. I feel like, okay,
sorry to interrupt. It sounds more advanced. You know, you're constantly in that state of meditation. Like that's what it says to me.
It's more like, I feel like, okay, I got my mind now to commit. Let's do it now. Let's not like otherwise I get distracted or something. Let's just go. I have the time now. Now it's perfect, because I don't have like, my day is not often planned like that, where I go like, okay, it's like this hour now I meditate. Sometimes it's like, yeah, so
my wife
when you
would
got the
agree
time to do it.
Barbara would agree with you, Mike. she's of that nature.
Yeah, I know
That's
it's
right.
shocking, but it's the truth. The truth can be shocking. All right, so we continue now. So we have Guruji. We have to imagine he's in his Kolkata home. He has organized his friend coming to pick him up in a hackney carriage, and one more thing, it's raining. So, and then rain can have different meanings. I feel like in a lot of ways, rain means cleaning, cleansing, healing. So might be I usually see rain as a positive sign, but he didn't explain it further, but he did say it rained. So good thing those hackney carriages have little roofs on top, so you don't get wet. Yeah, Lauren.
Well, he actually describes it as auspicious, which means
inauspicious.
Is it inauspicious?
Yeah,
inauspicious. Okay.
Yeah, that's the rule. That's the Indian
Yes, sorry,
understanding
inauspicious. Sorry,
of,
meaning
rain. Yeah.
Yeah, meaning that it may be suggestive of failure,
Yeah.
which is very interesting given what happens next. So yeah, it's a nice little word that he just drops in there to give us a hint of what might happen.
Yeah, so it's definitely, I'd say, yeah. Not sure if it's like Lauren said, it might not be a good omen, the rain. Chris?
He's certainly looking for them though, isn't he? Because it's not the first time in this chapter that he'll make a comment like that. So this is something that Yogananda, from a young age it's in his psyche, it's in his consciousness that he often looks to the world for prompting, for guidance. How should I follow this path? Is it the right one to do? And essentially that's the main thread of the story that I take from this whole chapter, really. But yeah, I don't know. I do this sometimes, but it rains all the time in Northern Ireland, so you can't really think about it in that way too much, unless you want to think every day is just going to be a sullen day. So yeah, it has different meanings around the world, I'm sure.
Don't you live in a rainforest now, where it's raining every microsecond?
Yeah, when I think about the rain, I think, oh great, more fruits to eat. So.
Chris is straying ever so close to talking more and more about the weather, which we vowed never to do after series 1.
Yeah,
we had barrage of complaints. So stop talking about the weather.
Yeah,
British.
When we started out, we were all in Europe, and then I think in Europe you just talk about weather all the time. But
now Mike just accepts sunshine. Sunshine is the norm.
Actually, in California, when it rains, especially in Southern California, it's seen as a good thing. So I don't think it's like seen, oh no, it rains. It's like, oh yes, we're not gonna have water.
I actually thought that the inclusion of this line makes like the plot thickens. It's like from the start of this chapter, it's like a very fast-paced, exciting bit of like board identity, like things are moving at like crazy speed, and then this line, and or something bad, also it's not going to go the way that it's planned, and that's obviously suggested in the title as well, my interrupted flight toward the Himalayas. But I like that these kind of lines keep your eyes glued to the next line, and makes you want to read or devour the whole chapter in one quick sitting. My eyes and my mind can't read fast enough sometimes for Guruji's narrative, but which is the opposite. Yeah, go on, Chris.
I've got something for you then, Priyank, is get the audiobook double speed, and then you can actually still follow through the text at the same time. You can train your mind.
But then I'd want it at quad speed.
Yeah. Never say never. Never say never.
Yeah.
Don't listen to it while driving, because that would be too much to comprehend, I guess.
But it's the opposite of when he talks about like God and like some deep spiritual thing. Then you have to read like the slowest of the slow, right? You literally can't move to the next line, which is really frustrating because I want to finish some of the books, but I can never you can never finish because it's just like so deep, isn't it? I mean, you have to move so slowly, and then you move so slowly that you forget where you are, and then you have to go back, and then you're in this constant state of staying where you are.
I would pre-warned about Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science book in that regard, and it bore true. That book is packed full of juicy information to dwell on.
I was just thinking about that as you were talking about it, because I have a copy of the Holy Science and I carry it around in my bag to read, on my commutes. And I end up, spending the whole journey sort of just reading one paragraph, going over it. And then I think, oh, wait, no, but what did he say in the previous paragraph?
Yeah.
And then I go back and then it's exactly like Brianne said. But hey, one day we should get there.
I had the same problem with that book, and the only way I got through it was by listening to there's an audiobook read by some person on audible.com. And the good thing is he doesn't stop, he just keeps going. Because the book is not very long, but it's just I just go like, what is that? What did he say? And then when you stop, you can't really, you never get back on track. It's really hard.
I did try that, but then I kept rewinding and pausing, and then infinite time would be spent in the pause mode, and then you're lost again.
Yeah, it's not an easy one, but I feel like now I listened to it 2 or 3 times already, the audiobook of the Holy Science. Do I understand more than before? I'm not sure, but
The new lessons app is so good that it's got the read feature, isn't it? Again, obviously you suffer the same problem where you need to pause and rewind, but it's still good because you can reading it and hearing it is quite a nice experience.
I started doing what Brother Bhaktivedanta said in that one talk. I just read 2 pages of the lessons each day, and I pick random lessons. That I have this big stash of lessons, or sometimes I just open the app, read a few pages, because you're right, the lessons are the same thing really. You could like go over it really slowly, and then that takes very long.
Yeah, and his poems are just on another level, aren't they?
Yes.
The old lessons, Lauren, had poems at the start of every lesson.
Wow.
Yeah. And really, really deep poems. They're like heavy literature. So you can't. I remember one day I spent like an hour on the poem, and I was like, "Oh, when am I ever going to finish this lesson?"
Do you know where they took them out?
No, they've got them, but they're just like scattered in different places. Whereas that was a format before. The lesson started with a poem, then I think a prayer, then went like that.
Yeah.
And they usually had a story as well. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Now, not, they still have stories, but not. I think the frequency is different. Yeah. Yeah. So he gets ready, and he mentions that he packed a bundle full of things, and then he mentions what is in his bundle, and I find that so interesting because he is the spiritual monk, and you feel like if you ever want to go on like a spiritual retreat, here are the things you need to bring. Yeah, Lauren.
It's interesting though, because before he packs his bag, he waits to hear the wheels of the carriage that his friend's arriving in, and then he hastily packs this little bundle of things, which again, it goes back to that like planning in a sense, because I'm assuming in a way that he may have thought, well, if I pack a bag the night before, if my brother finds it, then he'll know. So he literally waits until the last second and then just hastily grabs everything together. And what does he pack together, Mike?
It's a really good observation. Yeah, if he would have packed it before, his brother might have asked, "Where are you going?" Yeah, that's right. Okay, so he packs a blanket, a pair of sandals, 2 loincloths, a string of prayer beads. Probably that's like the Rudraksh that Priyank has, right? Then a picture of Lahiri Mahashaya and a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. So that's kind of the survival guide for everyone who ever wants to go out on a ad hoc spiritual retreats. There's the list. And I feel like, oh yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, this scene is depicted quite romantically and beautifully in the Awake, the Life of Yogananda film, where it's, you know, it's nicely shown. But I remember when I had a similar idea of packing spiritual stuff, I ended with, I picked the autobiography when I was a student on my travels. Good parallel to him taking the Bhagavad Gita. If Lahiri Mahashaya had written autobiography of Yogi as Lahiri Mahashaya, maybe he would have taken that.
Yeah. See, on this trip here, I think the only book I brought is Where There's Light, and I brought my diary, so I can do introspection, which I hope I'll have time for here. Yeah, Lauren.
I love like his little renunciance travel pack. You know, it's so scaled down, isn't it? Like, he doesn't take a toothbrush. He doesn't have any bodily concerns here. He's just about his divine search. And it got me thinking, you know, like, would you travel with that little things if you were going on a trip? I'm like, yeah, I was thinking, I'd like to think maybe one day I'll be at that level where I can just take some prayer beads, a Bhagavad Gita and a picture, but not quite yet.
It's funny, Lauren, you mentioned a toothbrush. It's a very wise choice. I was more thinking food. You know, Yogananda, he does talk about this, that he has such faith in God that he can literally step outside the door, go on a journey almost with nothing and still be taken care of. And we've seen that, done. He's run that experiment. It's worked before, and I guess that's just his mentality, that world will conspire in his favor. And it is such a ironclad, such a strong faith that it's scary to the rest of us that may not have quite as strong faith as he does.
Or inspiring.
Yeah. I think he's also, they did bring money, right? So if they want food, they can always go out and buy it. And I feel like Indian people at all times, especially when you are a bit better off, like their family, they have really high standards for food. So I don't think he would be happy with a I don't know, cheese sandwich or something. He would want warm prepared meals and all this kind of stuff. So I'm guessing that's the kind of thing that they would get on their journey. We'll see later how they got money for the trip. And yeah, so he says he takes the bundle and he throws it down from the 3rd floor and escapes through the window. I know he actually doesn't escape. He throws the bundle down and then he goes down the stairs and to pick up his bundle. So we do have to remember it rained, right? So this might not have been the best circumstances. It might have been wet down there, and he might have had to retrieve his bundle from the wet floor. And he also meets his uncle there, who is sees him how excited he is, and feels like, hey, where are you going? And it's like, nothing. And he just keeps walking. And he keeps going. And one of the questions that we haven't talked about yet is that he was, when the scene started out, he was sitting in the attic meditating, and he also brought a picture of Lahiri Mahashaya with him. So do we feel like that this is kind of his relationship? Kind of he sees Lahiri Mahashaya at this point as his guru and follows his teachings in meditation? Is that what we're assuming at this point.
Yeah, so he gets, when later on in the book, when he gets initiated by Swami Sri Yukteswar, he says that I'd received the technique from many times before, but never, I'm paraphrasing, had it had the same potency as when he received it through the divine diksha from Sri Yukteswar. So he would have had it from a few different sources.
Makes sense, yeah. So so at this point, he doesn't have that feeling yet that he has that guru. That's one of the reasons why he actually leaves the Himalayas, right? That he doesn't have that strong guru connection yet. But he does kind of, I would say, Lahiri Mahasaya is maybe like also the family guru, which is like a concept in India, I guess. And so he takes his picture. He's the closest thing to a guru that he has at this moment. So now he goes down there, he picks up his bundle, and outside is Amar waiting in this hackney carriage, and he gets on, and then off they go. And the first thing that they do is they try to disguise themselves. They want to not look like three boys that escaped. They maybe want to be more like tourists, and they go to an area where you can buy clothes, like a big marketplace, and they buy European clothes to look different and to kind of throw off. Mukunda is of course suspecting Ananta to be on their tails as soon as he knows he's gone, and that way it will be harder for them to be found. And I did some Googling. I was trying to find a bit what this would look like, European garb from the 1900s. And I see all those pictures of adorable school children, like they have like little jackets, they wear little knickerbockers, and then long socks, and like a little hat. And that's kind of how I imagine how those three must have looked like at this point. And one of the ways that they got the money was they saved their money. When it says tiffin money, Priyank, do they mean, is that lunch money that they kind of didn't spend on lunch? So they were foregoing lunch for weeks just to be able to do this trip, right?
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Especially as children, which essentially means that you're going hungry every day at lunch, between breakfast and dinner, no food. And in Mejda, we he had quite a big appetite. Mukunda did. We were told in Mejda. So this is no no mean feat for Mukunda to do this. But it's so inspiring, isn't it? That
yes,
he was so committed to this the Himalayas that they planned this for months of saving, and as a team as well.
Yeah, and you do know that Yogananda talked about the spiritual yeast that was building inside him, this amulet, pushed him to do this. But then his friend Amar, he didn't have that amulet, right? His excitement must have come from another source.
From Mukunda, maybe.
Was also, he was probably very persuasive, Mukunda, I guess. Very, very excited about this trip.
Yeah, Swami Satyananda says, because they were childhood friends, Swami Satyananda, who became his principal for the Ranchi school, in his book about Yogananda, as I have known him, in his book he talks about their childhood, and he talks about how much of a leader Mukunda was, how much of a steerer of groups. So he did so many things like create libraries and create gym groups and things like that. But he was always the one that was leading and instigating it. So this is obviously in resonance with that as well.
Yeah, and he was so persuasive that he didn't just convince Amar to join him, but also his cousin. His name is Jotin Ghosh, and he says he calls him Chatinda as his nickname. So that's their next stop. They take the hackney carriage to Jatinder's house, then they pick him up, and then off they go to the train station. So they feel like they're very well organized now. There are 3 people, they're in European clothes, and they have their train schedule and everything. So everything seemed to have worked out so far, right? What do you guys think? It looks, we did talk about the inauspicious rain earlier, but other than that, things seem to have worked out pretty well. Yeah, Chris?
When I was reading the build up to this part, Mike, I thought to myself, well, how can this fail? You know, I expected it to fail, but how can it fail? Because it's so well thought through. You know, they planned to meet the day before, to go at a certain time in the train, and how could they possibly fail? But equal to this effort was the brother, and the efforts then to stop the plan. But certainly at this point, Mike, you're right. I was thinking to myself, I need to know what's around the corner. You know, how does this, little movie finish?
And they probably felt this too, didn't they? Because he writes here, a deep elation possessed our hearts. So it's probably that feeling of, wow, we've done it, we're doing it, let's go. And little do they know what will happen next.
I too felt deep elations whenever we managed to, all 3 of us, get in our cars.
See?
Speeding away.
You were at the McDrive?
In our Ford Hackneys.
Yeah.
We didn't define how old you were, Priyank, did we?
16 or something.
Can you not say? Okay.
16. So definitely not of legal age in the UK.
This is a make-believe story.
Yeah, so Priyank can very much relate to this situation.
I'm sure we all can. Come on, you never had a deep elation at doing something a bit naughty as a child? No.
I was a very mischievous young child,
I
but not
thought
in the sense that I would sneak out. I never snuck out of my parents' house or went anywhere without telling them. But I was very cheeky as a young child. You know, I'd find great joy drawing on the walls. My mum said no, or like I was just into everything, and I didn't understand, and I just wanted to, be there.
Were you drawing like a man with long hair and long flowing robes or anything like that?
Who knows? I wish she'd kept the drawings, but they're probably just squiggles.
I think I was lucky enough to grow up in the countryside and had a little quad bike, and I had enough dangers going on, with day-to-day adventure that I probably didn't do too much. But I was always getting in trouble in school. I mean, if that counts, it's always.
God, did you get a deep elation?
Getting in trouble? Not often when you're
not getting in trouble, doing whatever it is that you're not supposed to be doing. the thrill.
I'm sure many times. Yeah, going too fast in the quad bike was usually pretty up there for me.
I bet, Chris, you're saying quad bike, but it's probably one of those toy ones that can only actually go on tarmac and stuff.
5 miles an hour.
90cc quad when you're probably 9 years old is rapid enough.
Yeah. Chris actually looked up what the name Jatinder means, which is a pretty nice name. What does it mean, Chris?
Yeah, we were looking at the topic of maybe nicknames, and Jatinder was the nickname, or at least what Yogananda Mukunda called Jatin Ghosh. And I thought, Jatinder maybe had some kind of meaning. Maybe Yogananda attributed some meaning to it, and whether he did or not, I'm not sure. But it does mean one who has conquered the 5 evils, or one who can conquer Lord Indra, or Lord of the Conqueror. So it's a pretty substantial name that Mukunda decided to call his partner in crime in this case. So I didn't have any exciting nicknames myself. CJ for short was about as dynamic as it got when I was young.
Jit is in many of the North Indian languages as still used for when you're saying winning at something, jeet. So it's part of everyday language, as it is derived from this Sanskrit word.
Yeah, I also didn't have any exciting nicknames. Whenever I start a new job, which I did recently, I go like, "Hey, I'm Mike," and then there's 5 other Mikes there. So it's always the same story. So
Chris in England or the UK.
Every
very common.
all Indians, actually, not all, but the majority of Indians have a family name, which only their family will know. So my family, my parents, my siblings and stuff, my first name is never used. Priyank is how you pronounce it. My nickname was Pintu, Pintu, and my sisters' names were their actual names were Tejal and Dipal, but we'd call them Tikku and Rinku. So it's like nickname. Everyone's got a nickname, and you'd go refer to them from their nickname, never their actual first name. And it's quite a loving, sweet-sounding nickname usually. And same with my wife's family as well.
So does your nickname have a meaning?
I don't know. But I don't know actually.
That's so sweet.
What? And then those nicknames, they continue in later life usually, or not?
Yeah, they do. But much to the consternation of some people. They don't want that childish nickname to carry on. It like diminishes the respect and reputation of another person. My wife doesn't like it when my family uses my nickname. We're like, no, he's not 5 anymore.
Oh.
I can reveal what it means, actually.
What? Pintu?
Yeah.
No, really?
Yeah, it's a Hindu baby boy name at times, apparently. Point or full stop or Rocky. So you're the point. You're the full stop. You're the final word in the set.
Wow, learn something new.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, let's bring it back. No. And so we're gonna conclude after one more thing in this episode, as we call it, because there's one more important thing that Guruji mentions in the last paragraph that we're talking about in this episode, which is that he does not want to take leather shoes on this holy trip, because leather is made through the slaughter of animals, and so he sees this as an unholy object that he doesn't want to take on him. And his Bhagavad Gita has a leather cover, which he also refuses to bring. Yes, Priyank?
Which is a slight confusion, because just a few lines before that, as he passed his uncle was buying fish at the door. So his uncle and his family did eat meat, and we're going to refer to that a bit later. But so just a few lines before that, he actually mentions explicitly that he was buying fish. There was no real need to add that line. But if you read Mejda, which we'll go to in a second, there's more information about that. But yeah, this is the case. Like not everyone in India is vegetarian, even though the moral precepts and the spiritual significance of vegetarianism is commonly known. Not everyone is a vegetarian.
So we said he probably feels elation when they're at the train station together, but I feel like for Mukunda it's more than that. It's like he now wants to live life the way he wants to, right? And maybe this is part of it, right? So if it was his household, there wouldn't have been any letter to begin with, maybe. And so he's like taking this part away, and this kind of trip should be pure, and anything that isn't needs to stay at home, I guess. Should we continue with reading this section from Mejda, Priyank?
Also, yeah, just quickly. Also, they were going to Rishikesh and Haridwar, which is at the foothills of the Himalayas, and that land, he'll describe it later as, it's a land that's been hallowed by many illumined saints. In that place, it's forbidden to basically you have to adhere to ahimsa. Ahimsa means basically non-violence, and Gandhi describes it as later in the book, not just non-violence, but non-violence in thought, word, and deed, and with it fearlessness and other things he incorporates into it. So in Rishikesh or Haridwar, non-vegetarian food is actually not permitted. So you'll go to any place, be it Hindu, Muslim, or Christian stall, there'll be no meat there, which is probably one of few places in India that are like that. And similarly goes for alcohol as well. Yeah, Chris.
The other, I was looking this up as well, and one of the key aspects of it is spiritual reason as well. So yogis would believe that actually wearing leather can interfere with the flow of energy in the body and disrupt the spiritual connection that they want to cultivate through the practice. And Yogananda talks about this a little bit when you're meditating, to have cotton. I believe it's cotton, right? So I don't want to speak too confidently, but I'm pretty sure it's cotton to the earth's pull when you're trying to meditate, so you can disconnect.
I think he says woolen blanket.
I think wool,
wool or silk, I think.
Yeah, wool or silk, yeah. And that's the best material even to wear, right? So don't these days we have a lot of synthetics and things like that. That's a whole other topic. But when you're meditating, it's useful to be wary of the materials that you're using.
I just got curious when Priyank started talking about the holy places of Rishikesh and Haridwar and how it is not allowed to eat meat there. Do you actually go to jail, Priyank, if you bring meat?
Well, they're very Hindu centric, right? So you may not go to jail, but the locals may trash your store or something like that.
Oh wow! Okay.
I think it probably isn't allowed. So I don't know what the sentence would be.
I like it. I'm not saying it's bad. All right. Should we start reading this? There's a section from Mejda that Priyank found, which is very interesting. It's about ahimsa and about hunting animals. Lauren, would you be so kind and read the first part?
I hope to pronounce this correctly. So Madho Prasad, second brother of Dwarka Prasad, was a great hunter. We loved his hunting dress. My admiration was such that I too wanted to become a great hunter when I grew up, even greater than Madho.
So this is probably Mukunda's brother speaking.
Yes, I was going to say this. This is Mukunda's brother, not Mukunda saying this, just to clear the air.
Sananda Lal Ghosh,
yeah. The whole world would know of me. The wild animals would run when they caught my scent. Because Ananta and Madho were close friends, our family was often the recipient of some of the game birds Madho killed. Meat was cooked and eaten with relish. But Mejda would not touch it. Although we all sat down together at mealtime, Mejda only ate rice and vegetables. Ananta would make me sit next to Mejda with my plate of savoury fowl just to tease him. But taking no notice, Mejda would eat his own food quickly and silently, and then excuse himself and leave the room.
When Mejda got me alone after these occasions, he would scold me. You are greedy to partake of such food, he would say. It is a sin to shoot innocent birds. Those who eat the meat share in that sin. It is so easy to accumulate sin, but very hard to earn virtue. All people must answer for their deeds in their life after death. So you must think before you do anything. He who cannot distinguish between right and wrong, justice and injustice, violence and non-violence, may be called anything but not a man. Powerful
Wow.
words.
Pretty,
Yeah.
pretty deep for lesson for little Sananda.
Mm.
You know, my dad is a man of few words, and he, you know, some people find that quite intimidating, actually. My friends, when they would be in his presence initially, but he's, you know, he's a big softie, really. And he would often tell me if, you know, I was having disputes with my sister or whatever was going on in the family, he would often say, Chris, the less said, the easier mended. And, you know, it's a really nice lesson there that Mukunda, you know, in this context, he's using that, isn't he? He's not actually speaking out at the dinner table. He's not causing a fuss, you know, in a social environment where, you know, it probably would cause more of a ruckus than anything. He's having a quiet word, you know, in private. And he in this part of the chapter as well did the same thing, right? You know, he was asked by his uncle, "Hey, where are you going? You're excited. Where are you off to?" And he smiled. He didn't say anything. So it's this idea, and it's mentioned again, you know, Mukunda, he didn't want to speak untruths. He didn't want to say anything too harsh, or, you know, he was very, very stern with his words and how he used his words. So it's a really nice lesson there.
You know, where he says, those who eat the meat share in that sin. Often when I used to debate vegetarianism a lot when I was there at university and school, actually. And this is, I ate meat for a little while and then went back to vegetarianism after, you know, going into the teachings. So yeah, so people would often, the most common argument, well, one of the most common arguments you'd hear is that, oh, I didn't kill that animal. I didn't, you know, have that, you know, factory where they do all that craziness to animals. So it's not me that's doing the killing. You know, Ahimsa, I didn't partake in the non-Ahimsa. So why is it a problem if I eat it? You know, I'd say things like, oh, if it was going to waste, surely you shouldn't waste food. And here, like, you're gonna Mukunda kind of clearly says that they share in that sin. And what a great thing to have Mukunda as an older brother.
Yeah.
Blessed.
I was buying shoes one day in London, and I went in and asked somebody in the shop, "Hey, do you have any non-leather shoes?" And the person had clearly never been asked that question before, and they were like, "Well, why do you want non-leather?" So, well, you know, I'm for my yoga practice, you know, I just was honest about it, and you know, I just wanted non-leather shoes. They said, "Well, sure, it actually makes more sense to be able to use all parts of the animal, just like you said there, Priyank, like, you know, this rationalism, just you lose sight of the true reality of the nature of it."
I think it also shows there was a special relationship between Mukunda and Sananda, that something that some of his, like, because he was with his family, right? So he could have just made that point at the table, like Chris said earlier, but he didn't. But he made the point to Sananda because he felt it important for him to convey it. And I am so happy to read all of this because, like, I grew up in Bavaria and in Austria, two places that love their hunting culture, and there's everything in culture is about, oh, when meat is fresh and blah blah blah, and nothing is about welfare of animals. It's all about how great you are when you kill a deer or something like that, and you put the antlers on the wall. And I always like find that the gruesome part of it is totally ignored, and I love that Guruji kind of puts the attention right there at how actually barbaric this is when you do this. So I'm very happy to read this, and the fact that he even said it as a young boy is very impressive. So this is kind of the the last section that we're going to talk about. Is there anything else we want to talk about in regards to this episode or a Himsa?
No, we covered it.
We have covered it.
Great, nice. Okay. Oh yeah, Priyank.
Yeah, just I thought it was a really good, fast-paced section of the book where you could just read it so freely and enjoy the journey of the book, as opposed to pondering over the deep deep things that is 90% of the book.
Yeah. And we'll continue like this. And do you want to give us a little teaser for the next episode?
Yeah, the next episode pretty much is the second half of this narrative, where they're still excited and they're still trying to ride on those elated wings, but being very careful about not being caught. And they think that their younger brother is hot on their tails, which turns out to be true in the end. But yeah, they talk about a few different things, but we'll talk about the holy places that are mentioned, how the adventure is kind of set out. We'll talk about how they treat setbacks and how we should treat setbacks in this little adventure of theirs, and truth and bending of truth we'll talk about, because they lie, but they don't want to lie. They want to tell the truth. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And also we'll talk about Ananta's methods of persecution. And we'll relate more of Mejda's stories. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I want to thank you three, and I want to thank our listeners and our watchers on YouTube. Thank you, everybody. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.